Hello and welcome to Arcadian. Despite being one of the most popular character ancestries in D&D, Tieflings have almost no information or lore about them in the 5th edition books. That's a shame, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, I believe that D&D ancestries should be different from each other, not only mechanically but also psychologically. This distinction enriches the role-playing experience, but we need information to support it. We need to know what makes a Tiefling a Tiefling. So, whether you're a new player wondering what makes this species special and fun to play as, or a seasoned player looking for pointers on how to deepen your roleplay of a Tiefling, this video is for you. This video is not for you, however, if you're not interested in D&D lore and if you believe that roleplay should be independent from the ancestry of your character. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing a tiefling or an elf or an orc as if they were humans, if that's how you like to play the game. It's not like all tieflings are the same or that yours can't be the exception to the rule, but I believe that different species with different lifespans, origins, family structures, and sometimes even blood ties to the ruler of hell must have different average personalities than your average human. Tilting towards those small idiosyncrasies that make a fantasy race truly distinct is something I believe enhances the roleplay experience. So take this video as a source of lore and roleplay ideas and pointers, but be aware this is where I'm coming from. So, Tieflings, who are they? In their core, humans. Tieflings are plain-touch people first introduced in AD&D, but only formalized as a playable race in 4th edition. They are humans with an infernal bloodline, which manifests as several fiendish characteristics, such as horns, differently colored skin and eyes, or a tail, and other traits that are not immediately apparent, such as innate spellcasting or the ability to speak infernal. Some rarer features include cloven feet, scales, feline pupils, fur, or vampire-like fangs. In summary, a customization paradise for players. In the past, the word Tiefling was used to identify any individual with fiendish blood, regardless of whether their fiendish ancestor was a devil, a demon, a Yugoloth, or anything else. But more recently, it refers specifically to the infernal variety, and that's by far the most prevalent. In fact, in the Forgotten Realms, a group of 13 powerful warlocks conducted a ritual that changed all Tieflings' original lineage to the one of Asmodeus. Of course, since then new tieflings have been born and created, so there are still other lineages for you to choose from, but the lineage of Asmodeus has become the default one. A tiefling can be created when a human is transformed into one through a powerful magic ritual, but the great majority is just born that way, because their bloodline was tainted with devil blood somewhere along their lineage. The 5e books are vague about how this happens, probably on purpose to give players a bigger latitude of backstories, but according to my knowledge, this taint can be either due to a pact an ancient ancestor signed with a fiend, or the consequence of actual interspecies breeding. Some sources say that tieflings always breed true, particularly those of 4th edition's Baal Turath. This is actually a pretty interesting concept to explore. I can imagine a setting where tieflings have been slowly reproducing over time until they became the dominant ancestry on the world. However, the 5th edition material implies that the Tiefling's infernal essence can skip generations, lying dormant as some sort of recessive gene, which is consistent with the Races of Faerun supplement published in 2003. This also presents some interesting roleplay opportunities, as two human parents may be surprised with a Tiefling child. Regarding Tiefling genealogy, it's also noteworthy to say that Tieflings are always human in ancestry, which means that dwarves, elves, orcs, and all the other ancestries can't canonically give birth to a Tiefling. There are Tiefling equivalents for those other species, such as the Fairy to the elves or the Meluth to the dwarves, but those are not core playable ancestries. Now, Tieflings don't have a homeland or a country, at least not in the Forgotten Realms. In my world, they actually do. They don't have a language, since infernal is not theirs, it's the devil's. They don't even have a culture, since they are fundamentally humans who were born differently, so their culture would be whatever human culture they were born into. Despite their devilish appearance, which can be more or less pronounced since there are tieflings that can easily pass as humans, tieflings don't have any actual inherent ties to the Nine Hells, or their fiendish ancestor. They're not like half-orcs who can hear the voice of Grumsh, or Aasimar who normally have angelic protectors. They're literally humans, just with horns, a tail, and some extra powers, which means that despite appearances, they are not more predisposed to be evil than your regular human. But that is not how society sees them, and that is the most defining trait of this ancestry. Playing a tiefling is playing an outcast. Tieflings are the victims of a mistrustful stereotype. People assume there are ties between them and the Nine Hells and assume they are thieves, swindlers, or worse. A tiefling child may very well be called a devil since young years just because they have tiny horns coming out of their forehead. Maybe even by their own parents. And those are the ones who are not killed at birth, mistaken for a cursed monster. Growing up within this atmosphere of distrustful gazes, malicious prejudice, or even open aggression leaves a mark and tends to mold the child into a bitter, slow to trust, independent, suspicious, and resented adult. Even though tieflings don't have a culture to call their own, if there is one common psychological trait most of them share, that's the armor each of them develops to respond to this hostile environment, which often manifests as an unusually strong charisma. That is why they receive a bonus to charisma, which is interesting when we compare them to other species, because while we can postulate that dwarves receive a bonus to constitution because they are biologically sturdier, or that elves receive bonuses to dexterity because their skeleton and musculature is different, with tieflings, it's purely cultural, which also raises the question of what would happen if they weren't raised in an environment where they are discriminated. Ironically, this stereotype they suffer does encourage tieflings to follow a life of crime or even to explore their connection to the Nine Hells, since society doesn't give them much choice and they do already have the fame. This, on its turn, reinforces the prejudice most people have against them, perpetuating the cycle. But not all respond to the prejudice this way. Some prefer to tackle the issues head-on, become paragons of virtue, and change people's perception of their ancestry through their example. Regardless of where in the spectrum a tiefling lies, how they respond to this prejudice must be a core pillar of our character when we play as one. If they grew in the middle of this discrimination, how did that shape them? Are they actively fighting it? Did they surrender, trusting society will never accept them? Do they even care? If not, why? Another interesting subject to ponder is what happens to a tiefling who received all the love and affection any child deserves while growing up. Not being subjected to the same prejudices, they will probably have grown less bitter and suspicious, but they must be aware they're physiologically different than humans. How did they address that? How did their parents? And what happens when they are forced to face the widespread prejudice? How will they respond? When you are surrounded by people who see you as the devil, though, the ones who don't become incredibly precious. So while tieflings can tend to be loners for all the reasons discussed so far, anyone who places their trust and friendship on them will see it returned exponentially. Tieflings will form incredibly strong bonds with those few they can trust, to the point they become the most loyal allies. That, my friends, is a character arc waiting for you to pick it up. D&D does a horrible job encouraging players to roleplay their ancestries truthfully, and players ignore design that ignores the player, so it's no wonder many people don't even try to do that. If you want to truly live the story of a tiefling opening up to a party of fellow adventurers and break the cycle of prejudice, you need to have DM buy-in, so this is something for you to discuss with your DM and integrate as part of your character's story. Another interesting plotline to explore as a tiefling is their connection to the Nine Hells. Either they're the distant biological descendants of an actual devil, or the byproduct of a curse that befell a distant ancestor. When your life is affected this much by something that wasn't your doing, you gotta feel curious about it. How would your tiefling respond? Would they research about the Nine Hells looking for answers? Would they hunt the devil that afflicted their blood with such a curse? Would they demand compensation under the form of some kind of patronage? Also, people tend to forget that tieflings are not physically humans, even if their psyche is almost identical. For example, depending on their bloodline, they may have fire resistance or cold resistance. It's fine to keep this trait as a cool advantage that only applies to combat, but it's even cooler to incorporate it into your roleplay. Maybe your tiefling of Asmodeus bathes in boiling water because warm water seems like cold water to them. Maybe they're always wrapped in several layers of clothing because anything cooler than a warm summer day feels like chilling winter for them. These are subtle ways to make your character more interesting and punctuate that they are not human, even though they sound like one. The truth is that tieflings are one of the easiest ancestries to roleplay in D&D. Unlike other ones like elves who are very alien and have a very different way of seeing the world, tieflings are human in essence, which not only gives them much more versatility as characters, but also makes them easier to understand. Their defining trait as an ancestry is not so much a cultural tradition or a biologically driven behavior, but an unfair stereotype imposed on them by society. This makes them the perfect option for playing as an angsty loner or an edgy anti-hero. Nevertheless, we must not forget that the Tiefling is, by the current definition of the ancestry, an outcast victim of unfair discrimination. This can be a very sensitive topic, so it might be a good idea for both players and DMs to discuss some boundaries and make sure that everyone is aware of what it means to play as a Tiefling in your DM's world. Is it necessary to play Tiefling this way or to have all of this lore in consideration? Absolutely not. For starters, every DM has their own world, so the Tieflings at your game may be completely different than the ones at mine. Maybe they are very prevalent people in your world, with no prejudice associated to them. Maybe they're space pirates. Maybe they're the Paladin Order. Maybe they're genetically modified elves. All this lore is just a tool to enhance roleplay, because even though you can't totally roleplay a fantasy race as a normal human, by truly delving in the alien minds of made-up species and all their idiosyncrasies, you'll be able to live not only as someone else, but as a completely different biological entity. And that's a joy only tabletop role-playing games can provide. If you want to hear more about why I think D&D ancestries don't encourage roleplay and the solution I came up with for this problem, you can check the video I link in the eye up there. If you made it this far in the video and you thought, hey, what that guy's saying is not complete nonsense, you may be interested in watching the exact same video but applied to elves, dwarves, and halflings. And legend tells that if you like this video and subscribe to the channel, your next roll will be a guaranteed natural 20. True story. Thank you for watching. I'm the first Arcadian, and some dads give their kids Legos.